Man threatens date, regrets it when he realizes who heard. She looked seriously uncomfortable. A few of the other diners heard what he'd been saying, and it was getting more concerning. When it looked like the girl was in serious danger, one diner decided it was time to intervene. A cop stood over the table, and he wasn't about to play this one by the book. The young woman was all dressed up for a night out. According to witnesses, she seemed nervous, but they assumed it was probably just the couple's first date. But it soon became apparent these weren't simply a few jitters from spending time with someone new. Beads of sweat appeared on the woman's forehead as the situation unfolded into something more sinister. The speed with which the young woman was eating her appetizer suggested she was hoping to make a hasty getaway. This wasn't just a bad date. It was at that moment the woman's date said something that pricked up everyone's ears and made it clear the young woman was not safe. "Well, at least I know you can swallow, right?" said the woman's creepy date, loud enough for other restaurant goers to hear. A few looked up at each other from across the room as if to confirm that they'd heard it right. Nobody spoke up. But rather than back off the restaurant's reaction, the man doubled down. "Oh, calm down. I was going to find out in a few hours anyway." The man spoke with the confidence of an untouchable mafia boss who owned the restaurant and everyone in it. The frightened girl made a hushed reply that no one could hear, but it clearly wasn't enough to get him to change his behavior as he continued with a threat that would have most onlookers calling the cops. "Sweetheart, I picked you up. I know where you live." The color drained from the young woman's face. It was clear she was dealing with more than just a bad Tinder match. She fumbled together an excuse and went to the bathroom to compose herself, but returned to the table, not wanting to leave the safety of the restaurant. Luckily, a young man in the restaurant had had enough and stood up. While it looked like the man was going to rescue the woman from the nightmare situation, the 20-something guy must have had second thoughts and sat back down. No one else dared to intervene. The woman was in seriously hot water. There was nobody she could call and didn't have a car to leave the restaurant. The woman's eyes darted around the room desperately as the man plowed forkfuls of food into his mouth. Was he just an exceptionally vile pig she'd met online, or did the "I know where you live" comment mean she was destined to end up in tomorrow's newspaper headlines? She was about to find out. The shadow of a tall man fell across the table. Now, in shock, the woman was reluctant to look up to see what the next chapter in this horror story had in store. Eventually, she was relieved to see a police officer standing there. But she'd been out with smooth talkers like this before and knew he'd be able to defuse the situation. She'd soon find herself trapped and desperate. The cop who stopped the young man from approaching earlier placed his badge on the table. He was going to handle this piece of work his way. "Now you go and settle your bill. The full bill now. This young lady shouldn't go hungry on account of your poor behavior. Or I can have some of my buddies pick you up." Disgusted by how he'd treated the woman, the man's response was exactly what the cop wanted to hear. Yes, of course, I'm sorry," stuttered the creep. Having made a note of the man's personal information, the cop made it clear he was never to see the woman again. After he left, the officer made a point of calming the woman down, but this was far from the end of the frightening evening for the woman. The cop, who'd been celebrating his daughter's birthday at a nearby table, invited the woman to join them. Fellow diners breathed a sigh of relief when they saw her laughing and enjoying the rest of her meal with the hero cop and his family. What would you do if you spotted a date going south like that?